All right, welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be stepping into the world of pharmaceutical manufacturing.
Oh, exciting.
It is, it is. Specifically, we'll be looking at FDA 21 CFR Part 211.
Okay.
And you might be thinking, paperwork? Really? But trust me, this is way more interesting than it might sound at first.
I agree.
We're zeroing in on Subpart J, considered like the heart of good manufacturing practices, or GMP, when it comes to keeping records squeaky clean.
Yes.
So whether you are, prepping for an inspection, brushing up on GMP, or just curious about how those medications we all need stay safe, we've got you covered.
Yeah, we're not just looking at dry regulations today.
Yeah.
We've got expert guides, real-world examples of what not to do, the whole 9 yards.
Absolutely. And our mission today, to figure out why all this record keeping isn't just red tape, but the bedrock of quality and patient safety.
Well, think of it like this. It's the difference between following a recipe haphazardly and really meticulously documenting every single ingredient, every measurement, every step. The kind of recipe that, lets you recreate that perfect dish every time.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely had some baking disasters where I, could have sworn I added that extra teaspoon of baking powder, only to realize later I absolutely did not.
Exactly. And in pharmaceuticals, we really can't afford those oversights.
Yeah.
Subpart J really hammers home the need for accuracy, legibility, and ensuring those records are updated, as things happen.
Right.
It's about people's health here.
Right.
So these records are really the proof in the pudding that you're following GMP to a T, and that your product is consistently meeting those specifications batch after batch.
I see. Okay, so that's why those pharmaceutical time capsules exist.
Yeah. You remember those reserve samples we talked about?
Right.
Subpart J actually tells you how long you need to keep those around.
Wow.
It's mind-boggling. Some of them have to be stored for years, even after the expiration date.
Really?
Yeah, it's like having that backup just in case, questions come up later on.
Oh, so it's like when, you keep all your car maintenance receipts.
Yes.
Just in case there's a problem, and you need to show that you've been keeping up with the regular checkups.
Exactly. And, on top of that, let's not forget audit trails.
Right.
Like the breadcrumbs leading you through, like that entire manufacturing process.
Oh, go.
Each person involved, every piece of equipment used, every test result, it all needs to be traceable.
So it's like a detective story, but for pharmaceutical manufacturing.
You got it. But it's not just about playing detective,
Okay.
This traceability helps you pinpoint, like, where a problem came from if something pops up.
Right.
But it also demonstrates that you're producing those medications consistently under controlled conditions.
I see.
That's what GMP is all about.
Yeah. So that detective analogy is really, really helpful. It's helping me understand why it's so vital.
Good.
I'm starting to get a feel for, how vital those records are to ensure quality and traceback issues.
And CFR Code of Federal Regulations Title 21211.pdf is your go-to guide to make sure everything's documented properly.
Okay.
Take equipment logs, for instance.
Yeah.
They need to be super detailed, like they need to include cleaning, maintenance records, even which batch was produced on that specific piece of equipment.
Got it. So, like, if an inspector comes in and wants to know when that tablet press was last cleaned, you better have those logs ready.
You better have them. Can you imagine trying to explain a gap in the records?
Yeah, that would not be good.
Not a good look at all.
So I'm definitely seeing how, all this meticulous documentation can really save you some headaches during an inspection.
Absolutely. And, we can't forget, we're in the digital age.
Right.
Paper records are becoming a thing of the past, so electronic systems are taking over.
Right. So how does Subpart J handle data security in this whole new world?
That's a great question. We're stepping into a new frontier, and we need to make sure those records are just as secure as they were in the paper world.
So how does Subpart J address those challenges?
Well, Subpart J lays out some really specific requirements for those electronic signatures, and CFR Code of Federal Regulations Title 2111.pdf really, spells it all out.
Okay.
Each signature needs to be unique to the person, verifiable, and it has to be linked to the record in a way that prevents any kind of tampering.
So it's like a digital fingerprint that can't be messed with.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's all about making sure those digital records are just as reliable and trustworthy as the paper ones.
And it's not just about, like, someone intentionally trying to change the data, right? You also need to protect against those accidental errors, data corruption, all those little things that can happen in the digital world.
Absolutely. Data integrity is really paramount here.
Yeah.
We need to make sure those electronic records are complete, they're accurate, they're consistent, they're trustworthy, because after all, we're making big decisions about product quality and patient safety based on this information.
Okay, so those electronic signatures are locked down. But what about the bigger picture? How does Subpart J make sure those digital systems are really up to par?
Well, CFR Code of Federal Regulations, Title 2111.pdf, lays out a whole bunch of requirements for these electronic record-keeping systems, covering everything from data security and audit trails to system validation and even disaster recovery.
Wow.
It's like a blueprint for building a digital fortress to protect all those precious data gems.
So they're really thinking ahead and trying to anticipate all those digital challenges.
Exactly. And as more and more companies make the switch to these electronic systems, we're seeing more guidance documents pop up to address those needs.
Okay.
It's a dynamic field that's constantly changing.
It's like they're playing a game of regulatory chess, always thinking a few moves ahead.
That's a great analogy, and that's why it's so important for anyone in this industry to, stay up to date and be proactive about adapting to those regulations. Now, stepping back a bit, let's talk about those comprehensive records being the backbone of effective quality management.
So we're moving beyond just individual records and looking at the whole system.
Right, because without those clear, accurate records across the board, it's like trying to, navigate a maze in the dark.
Yeah.
You can't identify trends, you can't analyze those deviations or really make any informed decisions to improve your processes.
Makes sense. If you don't even know what's happening, how can you fix it?
Exactly. And David M. Blaisner establishing a CGMP laboratory audit system, a practical guide, really highlights this perfectly.
Okay.
It emphasizes that if you're failing to review documentation, conduct thorough investigations, or resolve discrepancies, those are major red flags during an audit.
So those comprehensive records are like your shield against those potential problems.
Yes, it shows the inspectors that you have a good system in place, you understand why documentation matters, and you're using it to, keep improving your operations.
Right. Okay. And speaking of inspections, those can be pretty nerve-wracking.
Oh, yeah.
I imagine having those records in order can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. Inspectors want to see that you're walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Yeah.
They're going to go through those records with a fine-tooth comb to see if you're really committed to quality and compliance.
So those clear, organized records, it's like a signal to them that you're serious and you're ready to back up your processes.
It builds trust, and it shows that you're not cutting any corners.
Yeah.
There's a great story in Michael A. Brown, A History of a CGMP Medical Event Investigation. About this, the company aced their inspection because they were so prepared with all the documentation, presenting this really confident and organized front.
Wow.
So, we've talked about how important those comprehensive records are for quality management and inspections.
Right.
But let's not forget the big picture, making sure those products are safe and effective for patients.
That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. And before any drug product can be released to the public, you need rock solid evidence that it meets all those requirements.
Right.
So where do you think that evidence comes from?
The records, of course, they tell the whole story of that product's journey, from raw materials to finished goods.
You got it. Those detailed records of all the testing, the approvals, the reviews throughout the whole process. That's the basis for saying, yes, this product is good to go.
Okay, and that's where the quality control unit comes in, right? CFR Code of Federal Regulations, Title 21.211.pdf, really highlights their crucial role in reviewing and approving all those records before a product can be released.
You're right. They're like the gatekeepers, making sure those records tell the whole story and tell it accurately.
So it's not just checking if the paperwork is filled out correctly.
No, they're looking for trends, they're looking for patterns, any little thing that might, suggest a problem.
Oh, wow.
They're responsible for making sure the product meets all those predefined specifications and that it's been made according to GMP.
That's a big responsibility.
It is. And speaking of responsibility, CFR Code of Federal Regulations, Title 21.211.pdf, really emphasizes how important it is to have qualified people at every stage of that manufacturing process.
Right, because you could have the best equipment, you could have perfect procedures written down, but if people actually operating the systems aren't trained, it all falls apart.
Absolutely. That's why personnel qualifications and their training records are another crucial part of that GMP documentation puzzle.
It's like building a chain of trust, and every link has to be strong.
Right.
So, we've talked about batch records, equipment logs, personnel training. What other kinds of documents fall under Subpart J?
Oh, the list goes on and on. We got those master production and control records. Think of those as the blueprints for making each product. They list every single step, every ingredient, every specification.
So the master record is like the blueprint, and then the batch record is the actual, construction log for a specific batch.
Perfect analogy. We've also got records for labeling, packaging, complaint handling, stability testing, so much more.
It's really, truly a comprehensive system. It captures everything about the manufacturing process.
It really does.
Now, you mentioned complaint handling. I'm curious about that one.
Yeah.
What role do records play in dealing with those complaints?
Well, every complaint means an investigation.
Right.
That investigation needs to be documented from start to finish.
I see.
It's about making sure those complaints are taken seriously and that you actually find out what caused the problem.
So it's not just about responding to the customer and making them happy. It's about actually using those complaints to learn and to improve.
Exactly. Complaints are really valuable sources of information. They can show you potential weaknesses and point to, areas that you could do better.
Right.
But if you don't have those detailed records, you lose that opportunity.
It's like every complaint's a little clue.
It is. It is.
So what other areas does Subpart J cover?
Well, it also talks about how to handle returned and salvaged drug products, which can be, a little tricky.
Okay, why is that? Why are those so sensitive?
You need really clear procedures and documentation to make sure those returned products are handled the right way.
Uh-huh.
You need to figure out, can they be salvaged? Can they be reworked? Or do they need to be destroyed?
Right.
And every single decision needs to be documented, and you got to be able to justify it.
It all comes back to minimizing risk, right?
Absolutely. You don't want any compromised products getting back into circulation.
Yeah, of course not.
And while we're talking about minimizing risk, Subpart J also covers how to handle rejected components, drug product containers, even closures.
So what happens to those? Do they just get, thrown in the recycling?
No, you need procedures for identifying them, separating them, and disposing of them.
Okay.
And of course, you need to be able to trace them back, where they come from, why were they rejected, and how did you get rid of them?
It's like a chain of custody, but for rejected materials.
You got it.
All about maintaining that control and that traceability, even when things go wrong.
You're absolutely right. It's amazing how Subpart J covers all these bases, all to make sure those products are safe and effective.
It's really incredible how much thought goes into every single step of this.
It really is.
It really highlights how interconnected everything is in this industry.
It does. And speaking of interconnectedness, remember those electronic record-keeping systems?
Yeah.
They're really key for ensuring data integrity and keeping those documentation standards high in this digital world.
And CFR Code of Federal Regulations Title 2111.pdf lays out those specific requirements, right? To make sure the systems are secure and reliable and compliant with GMP.
Exactly. And as technology keeps advancing, we're seeing those regulations evolve to keep up, addressing things like data integrity, cybersecurity, and more. It's a constant game of catch-up.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling how fast technology is changing everything.
It is.
So for someone who's, new to the industry or just feeling a little overwhelmed by all this information, what advice would you give?
Don't panic. It's a lot to take in, but you don't need to become an expert overnight.
Right.
Focus on understanding those core GMP principles, and then you can gradually learn more. There are tons of resources out there to help, FDA guidance documents, industry publications, online courses.
Okay. So it's definitely possible to learn as you go.
Absolutely.
And as we've seen, record keeping is really the foundation of everything in pharmaceutical manufacturing. It's not just paperwork. It's a tool to ensure quality and safety and build that trust that's so important.
You're exactly right. And as technology keeps advancing, as new challenges come up, you can bet those regulations and guidelines will keep adapting right alongside.
Yeah.
It's all about protecting public health and making sure those life-saving medications stay effective and safe.
It's inspiring to see how much care and attention goes into every part of this industry. We've explored Subpart J's requirements for those accurate, legible, and records that are maintained, as things are happening.
Yes.
And we've talked about how critical record keeping is to show that you're complying with GMP, covering everything from those retention policies and audit trails to data security and even those electronic signatures.
Mm-hmm.
We've also seen how those really comprehensive records help you manage quality effectively. They make those inspections less intimidating, and they're the basis for deciding whether a product can be released.
We even touched on the human side of it all, how important data integrity and those good documentation practices are.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has.
And I think we've all gained a deeper understanding of just how crucial record keeping is in the pharma world. It's not just about ticking boxes, it's about making sure patients are safe and building that trust in the medications that we all depend on.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey to the world of pharmaceutical record keeping. Until next time, keep those records squeaky clean and those data gems shining bright.
It's about ensuring those medications are safe and effective for the patients. That's the ultimate goal.
Absolutely. And before any pharmaceutical product can hit the market, you need, that solid proof that it checks all the boxes.
Right.
And that evidence, it all comes from the records.
Right, exactly. Those meticulous records of all the testing, the approvals, the reviews throughout that entire process.
Yeah.
That's the foundation for, making that decision to release the product.
Right. And this is where the Quality Control Unit steps in. CFR Code of Federal Regulations, Title 21-211.pdf, really puts a spotlight on their role, in reviewing and approving all those records before a product gets the green light.
They're like those guardians of quality, making sure all those records tell a complete and accurate story.
So it's not just about, making sure all the forms are filled out correctly. It's really about understanding the narrative that those records are telling.
Exactly. They're looking for, trends, patterns, any hint that something might be off.
Oh, wow.
They're the ones responsible for making sure the product meets all those predefined specs and that it's been manufactured the right way. According to GMP, it's a big responsibility.
Yeah, talk about pressure. They're like the last line of defense before a product gets to the patients.
Right.
And speaking of responsibility, CFR Code of Federal Regulations, Title 21-211.pdf, really emphasizes how crucial it is to have qualified personnel at every step of the manufacturing process.
You can't underestimate
Right.
that. Absolutely. You can have the best equipment, picture-perfect procedures written out, but if the people running those systems aren't properly trained, it all falls apart.
Yeah.
So those personnel qualifications and training records, those are another really important piece of the GMP documentation puzzle.
Yeah, it's like building a chain of trust, and each link has to be strong.
You got it.
We've talked about batch records, equipment logs,
Yeah.
and personnel training. What else falls under Subpart J? What other kind of documents are we talking about?
Oh, we've got master production and control records. Think of those as the blueprints for making each product.
Okay.
They have every step laid out, every single ingredient, every single specification.
So the master record is the blueprint, and then the batch record is like the construction log for a specific batch. They work together.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
You also have records for, labeling and packaging, complaint handling, stability testing, the list goes on.
Wow, it really is a comprehensive system. It captures every single aspect of the manufacturing process.
Every little detail.
Now, you mentioned complaint handling earlier.
Yes.
What role do the records play in how you deal with those complaints?
Well, whenever there's a complaint, that triggers an investigation. And that investigation has to be meticulously documented. It's about making sure those complaints are taken seriously and that you really figure out what went wrong, what caused that problem.
So it's not just about, keeping the customer happy. It's about using those complaints as opportunities to actually learn and improve the processes, right?
Exactly. Those complaints are like gold mines of information. They can highlight those weaknesses and point to areas where you can improve.
Right.
But if you don't have those, detailed records, you miss that chance.
It's like every complaint is a little clue, a little piece of the puzzle.
You're exactly right.
So what other areas does Subpart J touch on?
Well, it also covers how to handle returned and salvaged drug products, which can be, a little tricky.
Oh, okay. Why is that? Why are those so sensitive?
You really need those clear procedures and documentation to ensure that those return products are handled properly.
Mm-hmm.
You need to figure out, can this be salvaged? Can it be, reworked, or does it need to be destroyed? And every single decision has to be documented, and you need to be able to justify it.
It all comes back to minimizing risk.
Absolutely. You don't want to risk any compromised product getting back out there.
Right, of course.
And speaking of minimizing risk, Subpart J also covers how to deal with those rejected components, drug product containers, and enclosures.
What happens to those? Do they just get, like, thrown away?
Not exactly. You need those procedures in place to identify them, to separate them, and then dispose of them properly.
Okay.
And of course, you have to be able to trace them back. Where did they come from? Why were they rejected? How'd you get rid of them?
It's like a chain of custody, but for rejected materials.
Exactly.
It's all about maintaining that control, that traceability, even when things go wrong.
You're absolutely right. It's amazing how Subpart J really covers so much, all with the goal of ensuring those products are safe and effective.
It's incredible, the level of detail and thought that goes into every single step.
It really is impressive.
It really shows how connected everything is in this industry. You can't just look at one piece in isolation.
And speaking of those connections, remember those electronic record-keeping systems we talked about?
Yes.
They're really crucial for maintaining data integrity and upholding those high standards of documentation in this, increasingly digital world.
And CFR Code of Federal Regulations Title 2111.pdf lays out those requirements, right? To ensure those systems are secure and reliable and compliant with GMP.
Exactly. And as technology keeps advancing, you can bet that those regulations will evolve to keep up, addressing data integrity, cybersecurity, all those emerging challenges.
Yeah, it's amazing how fast technology is changing things.
It really is.
So for someone who's, new to the industry or maybe just feeling a little overwhelmed by all this, what advice would you give them? Where should they start?
Don't panic. It's a lot to take in. You don't have to become an expert overnight.
Right, take it one step at a time.
Yeah, focus on grasping those, core principles of GMP, and then you can build your knowledge from there. And there are tons of great resources out there, like FDA guidance documents, industry publications. You can even find online courses.
That's encouraging. It's definitely a journey, but there's support available.
Absolutely.
And as we've seen, record keeping is truly the foundation for everything in pharmaceutical manufacturing. It's not just paperwork. It's really a powerful tool for ensuring quality and safety and building that essential trust.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And as technology keeps evolving, as those new challenges pop up, you can be sure those regulations and guidelines will keep adapting right alongside.
It's all about protecting public health.
Yeah.
And ensuring those life-saving medications are safe and effective. It's an important mission.
Absolutely.
Well, we've explored Subpart J's, those requirements for accurate, legible records that are maintained, in real time.
Yes.
We've talked about how crucial record keeping is for demonstrating compliance with GMP, covering, retention policies, audit trails, data security, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we saw how those comprehensive records really help support effective quality management. They make those inspections a little less scary,
Yeah.
and they ultimately serve as the basis for those product release decisions.
We even touched on the human side of record keeping, and how data integrity and those good documentation practices are so, so vital.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has.
And I think we've all come away with a deeper appreciation for just how crucial record keeping is in this industry. It's not just about checking boxes. It's about ensuring patient safety and building that trust in the medications that we all rely on.
Absolutely well said.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive.
I agree.
Thank you all so much for joining us on this incredible journey through the world of pharmaceutical record keeping. Until next time, keep those records clean and those data gems sparkling.